Chapter 51 Good words are hard to persuade. You are listening at novelfull.audio. On campus. What do you think about this? Chloe looked at Gino. It's what you think. Gino narrowed his eyes. A girl who weighed over 200 pounds lost a ton of weight overnight. Liposuction aside, she probably got hit by kryptonite and got some weird powers. Clark didn't think it was that strange. Maybe you're reading too much into it. Maybe she just took some diet pills. That's like you blaming everything weird in town on the meteor shower. Chloe frowned, annoyed. My theory has merit. It's fascinating, but you refuse to believe it. Most people wrote off her claims as nonsense, which ticked Chloe off. I think it's interesting. Gino put his hands in his pockets and glanced at Clark. Remember where you were when the meteor shower happened? Clark lowered his head, pursed his lips, and shook his head. I don't know. My parents hadn't adopted me yet. Gino clapped his hands, smiling. I remember it perfectly. Lex and I were in town with my dad when the meteor hit. The first meteor landed near me and Lex. He lost all his hair from the impact. Clark pursed his lips. Was it his arrival that caused all these problems? Clark looked at Gino's arm. Maybe Gino's strength came from the meteor, too. So, Gino concluded, something's up with Julie. Hey, I think she's hot. Pete sounded a little defensive. He'd finally found a date for the dance, and his friends thought she was a monster. Personal advice, Peter, Gino said, glancing at Pete, you might want to keep your distance from that girl. Hey, there you are, a girl named Julie spotted the four and her eyes lit up. She ran towards them, then clutched her stomach, looking pained, but the pain seemed to last only a second. Her smile returned, and she walked towards them, or, rather, towards Peter. Gino glanced at Julie. He'd never heard of her before, but his super memory quickly dredged up her previous appearance from a geometry class. She was bloated, her eyes darted around, and she was completely unconfident and scared. His eyes flicked to her face, neither fat nor thin, and her slightly chubby thighs, which confirmed his suspicions even more. Gino. Clark calmly leaned in and whispered in his friend's ear, think she's like Greg. That having been burned before, Clark had matured and no longer viewed society and human psychology as being beautiful as in fairy tales. Gino patted Clark on the shoulder. Get ready, Clark. Julie ignored Gino's meaningful look. She just looked at Pete, excited, grabbed his hand, and said, Are you free at noon? I want you to help me pick out a dress. Ceremony, dress. Pete glanced at her ample chest, swallowed, and agreed without hesitation, sure, I'd love to. Julie giggled at Pete's eagerness. Let's go, then. The girl led Peter away, and they walked off campus, chatting and laughing. Gino, we should stop her. Clark sounded anxious. Peter was his friend, and he didn't want him turned into a mummy. I tried. Gino shrugged, looking indifferent. But he doesn't seem to want our help. So, Gino patted Clark's shoulder, the best thing to do is mind your own business. Respect others' choices and let it go. Right. But. Clark started to say something, but Gino had already left with Chloe. I gotta go check it out. Clark started to follow Pete to protect his friend, but a voice called from behind, Clark, where are you going? It was Lana. Clark's eyes lit up, and he calmly stepped back. He turned around to see Lana, wearing a pink top and black sweatpants, her hands on her hips, staring at him, annoyed. Clark, we were supposed to go to my place at noon to help me pick out a dress. You didn't forget, did you? She tugged on her ponytail. What hairstyle should I wear to the prom? I can help with that. Clark said firmly, smiling. I've watched my dad help my mom pick hairstyles for years. I've got experience. What about Pete? Clark comforted himself, thinking, she seems to really like him, so she probably won't hurt him. Small town dress shop. Pete followed Julie into the store, looking around. Because of the prom, a lot of high school students were here, picking out dresses for tonight. Which one do you think I should wear? Julie and Pete walked past the racks of dresses. Pete thought for a second. You look great in anything. I need the one that looks best. Julie's lips curled up, obviously flattered by Pete's compliment. Pete scratched his cheek, glanced at the clothes, and pointed at a sexy red dress. How about red? Julie followed his gaze and looked at the red dress. She felt emotional. She used to only be able to look at these beautiful skirts, but now she can wear them. Wait here. Julie touched Pete's lips, then turned to leave, winking at him. She grabbed the red dress and headed for the fitting room. She went around the corner, through the crowd. Gurgle, the hunger returned, stronger than before, and Julie clutched her stomach. Wow, who's this? A guy's voice sounded above her. Julie looked up and saw it was the jerk who made fun of her on the playground yesterday. A vicious thought popped into her head. The guy didn't notice the hatred in her eyes. His gaze moved over Julie's body. I didn't expect you to lose so much weight. It's incredible. Huh, what a coincidence. Julie suppressed her hunger, struck a pose, and gently shook the red dress in her hand. You want to see me up close? In this dress? Chapter 52 Missing Pete. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Small town clothing store. How funny. The guy took a delicate sniff of the perfume on Julie's clothes. Seriously, did you just come from the gym? He glanced at Julie's figure and casually wrapped an arm around her waist. Yeah, I didn't think I could pull it off. Julie tried to ignore the ick factor, hearing the sweet nothings from yesterday's jerk. I'm starving, though. Can you do me a solid? What's up? Thinking she was trying to get him all hot and bothered, he purred. What kind of favor? Simple. Just a little one. Julie rubbed her chin. It involves your body. My body. He closed his eyes, a blissful expression spreading across his face, picturing all sorts of things. But unseen by him, Julie's face darkened, her jaw tightening. Her mouth stretched open like a python ready to strike. Thump, star. She slammed her hands down on his shoulders, her neat teeth instantly transforming into razor-sharp fangs that pierced his flesh like a straw. Click, star. A sliver of sunlight pierced through the wall. Reflected in it, Julie tilted her head back, greedily gulping down the unlucky guy's body fat. My neck. He managed a choked scream, but the noise from the crowd outside swallowed it. Then, silence. Hey, what about this dress? Julie, radiating confidence, strolled out of the dressing room. She flipped her hair and spun, imitating a ballerina. Killer. Pete grinned, his heart skipping a beat at her figure. I can't wait for tonight's dance. Me too. Julie stared back at the fitting room with a creepy look in her eyes. I'm really looking forward to tonight. That night, Luthor Castle, usually quiet, blazed with light. The old butler was a stone-cold pro, having served the Luthors since he was 20, the lavish red carpet stretched from the castle entrance to the party. It was 9:30 p.m., 30 minutes before the dance. Plenty of people in formal wear had already gathered outside. Ladies and gentlemen, the old butler announced, clearing his throat into a microphone. Welcome to Luthor Castle. Now, please escort your dance partner down the red carpet and join us for a wonderful evening. The castle gates swung open. The first couple looked a little shaky, but they masked their nerves and stepped inside. More couples followed, walking the red carpet and being ushered into the venue. Tables, chairs, and food had been set up on the sprawling lawn in front of the castle. Waiters navigated the crowd with trays. Most of the guests weren't used to such a fancy affair, and some seemed out of their element. They fidgeted with their ties or held their wine glasses at awkward angles, trying to look elegant. Even their conversations were hushed, afraid of seeming gauche. A black stage stood in the middle of the lawn, equipped with speakers and musical instruments, ready for a performance, but everyone had the same question on their minds. Where was the host? Where was the owner of the castle? Here they come, someone shouted, and as spotlights on the castle's top floor illuminated the red carpet, Gino and Clark, tall and handsome in black suits, entered with their dates. but compared to Gino's cool confidence, poor Clark moved like a wind-up toy, practically dragging his date, Lana, with him. "Clark," Gino murmured. "Match my pace. Relax and look like you're having fun." "Yeah, Clark, just breathe and follow my lead," Lana added quietly, taking a deep breath. Clark tried to calm down, and he and Lana walked into the venue under everyone's stares. "Everyone," Gino said, releasing Chloe's hand as he stepped onto the black stage alone. Hundreds of eyes were on him. All attention was focused on him. He grabbed the microphone and said smoothly, "Now, please enjoy the dance." As soon as he finished, light, melodic music filled the air. Under Gino's lead, the initially stiff guests quickly loosened up. Whether they knew how to dance or not, they took their partners' hands and joined in. "Wow, I didn't know you were such a good dancer." Chloe spun in Gino's arms. Only when the music stopped did she catch her breath. I get by." Gino smiled, not about to tell her about his miserable childhood, where his family forced him to learn fighting and ballroom dancing. Anything that smacked of class, they'd made him master. Gino couldn't help but wince when he saw Clark and Lana out of the corner of his eye. Compared to his own smooth moves, Clark looked like a total klutz. He kept stepping on Lana's feet and nearly tripped himself. Clark had a long way to go if he wanted to win over the goddess. "Hey, where are Pete and Jolie?" Chloe asked, looking around. "I hope they're okay." "Who knows?" Gino shrugged. "If you're worried about Pete, ask my butler. He's got the guest list." "Gino, can I have this dance?" Seeing Gino and Chloe weren't together, a girl immediately rushed up and asked. Gino smiled. "Sure, why not?" As the music started, Gino took to the dance floor with his new partner. Chloe glanced at Gino, then at Clark, who was finally starting to enjoy himself with Lana. She sighed and headed for the old butler in the castle. She was worried about Pete and Jolie. Chloe stopped the butler. "Excuse me, is Pete Coulson on the guest list?" "Let me see, madam." The butler adjusted his glasses, scanned the list, and shook his head. "I'm afraid not. That name isn't on the list. Perhaps your friend didn't make it to the party." Hearing the butler's words, Chloe's heart sank. Her worst fear was coming true. Pete hadn't shown up, and neither had Jolie. "No. I have to go check this out." Chapter 53 Panic Pete. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The two-story house on the west side of town stood silent in the night. Ahem. Peter, in a black suit, checked his watch, a knot of anxiety in his gut. It was 10:10 p.m., 10 minutes past the start time for Gino's dance. "Hey, Julie, you in there?" Pete loosened his tie, remembering the expensive suit he'd rented for this date. "Coming." Julie's voice floated from behind the door. She opened it, smiling, in a red dress. "Wow, you look amazing tonight." Peter couldn't help but notice her height and long legs. She looked like she belonged on a runway. He held out the flowers. "These are for you." "Thank you." Julie's eyes sparkled as she took them. It was the first time anyone had ever given her flowers. She looped her arm through his. "Let's go." "Thanks." Julie giggled, and they headed toward the car. Her smile faltered as a sharp pain ripped through her abdomen, causing her to wince. Her grip on Peter's arm loosened. "You okay?" "You look a little pale," Peter said, concerned. "Should I take you to the hospital?" Julie gasped, fighting the emptiness in her stomach. Her gaze fixed on Peter's full lips, seeing them as two juicy hot dogs. He looks tempting, delicious, she swallowed, horrified by her own thoughts. What am I doing? Pete's a good guy. He stood up for me. I can't hurt him. Clenching her fists, Julie blurted out, "Pete, you're great, but I'm not feeling well." Turning, she ran toward the house, clutching the flowers. Her voice broke as she cried out, "You're a good person. Just go." She couldn't bear to hurt the only boy who'd been kind to her. "Wait, Julie." Peter watched her disappear, his face falling. What a weird girl. Now what? His date was gone, and he was going to miss the dance. Showing up late, was a fate worse than death. Great. Betrayed, Peter felt a wave of self-pity. I'm going home to order a bucket of fried chicken and a watermelon. Pete, that a voice interrupted his pity party. Chloe was leaning out of Clark's SUV, parked across the street, her face was etched with worry as she waved him over. Get over here, quick, not just minutes ago, a bombshell had hit the town's rumor mill. Keno had been found dead at Bayless gift and clothing store, completely drained of fat. Chloe was convinced something was seriously wrong with Julie. What's up? Seeing Chloe's expression, Peter rushed to the car. As Chloe told him about Keno, Peter's face paled, his voice trembling. You mean, Geno's a mummy? He remembered seeing Keno with Julie at the gift shop that afternoon. Unbeknownst to them, someone was watching from the second floor of Julie's house, jealousy twisting her features. The painful hunger was consuming her. Chloe. Her face contorted into a horrifying mask. Coarse, black hair sprouted across her skin, her slender arms warped and twisted, growing razor-sharp claws, rips appeared in her back as a pair of grotesque, pus-dripping wings unfurled, filling the room. Shriek, the bat-like monster emitted an ear-splitting shriek that shattered the window and echoed down the street. The sound sent shivers down Peter's spine. He turned toward the noise. Perched on the balcony was a monstrous bat, its eyes fixed on him. Oh my God, Pete shrieked, his fight-or-flight instinct kicking in. He dove into the SUV, scrambling onto the seat. Did you see that thing? Drive. Drive. Get us out of here. What is that? Chloe cursed, flipping him off. I told you something was wrong with Julie, and Keno warned you. Now look what happened. She slammed the SUV into gear and floored it. The off-road vehicle roared to life, speeding away from the house. Everything around them became a blur. Chloe kept her foot on the gas, the engine screaming as they tore down the road, inside the car. It's still chasing us. Peter didn't dare look back, only glancing at the rearview mirror and seeing the monster gaining on them. What do we do? Tears welled up in Peter's eyes. He vowed to slap himself if he made it out alive. Chloe swerved onto the highway, yelling at Peter, idiot. Call Keno and Clark, they were the only ones who could help them now. Right. Keno and Clark. Pete grabbed his phone, his hands shaking. Staring at the rearview mirror, he muttered, hurry, hurry, he'd never even been in love. He didn't want to die. Pete, hurry. Chloe screamed. The monster was gaining. Its sharp fangs were visible. Pete, you're mine. Chapter 54. Give you the big would you like to eat. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Highway 5 in Smallville Township, pitch black. Ravens in the surrounding woods cawed, adding to the eerie silence. Then, a beam of headlights sliced through the night. Vroom, a red SUV sped down the road, scattering the ravens. Whoosh, before they could regroup, a dark blur followed. Sensing danger, the ravens flapped their wings and scattered. Inside the SUV, wind whipped through the open windows. Chloe yelled over the noise to Pete, call Keno. Clark's MIA. She knew Clark's brain turned to mush around Lana. Time was critical. Between Clark and Keno was the better bet. He was reliable. Keno never seemed interested in girls, so he wouldn't be distracted and ignore his phone. Pete's shaky fingers finally dialed Keno's number. He glanced at the dark forest behind them, where the ravens swirled. It's still back there, Pete said, his face pale. He hung up and fumbled for paper and pen in the glove compartment. Chloe frowned, accelerating. What are you doing? Writing a goodbye note, Pete sniffled. Want me to write one for you, too? Shut up, Pete. Chloe snapped. We're not dying here. Why not? Because I trust Keno. Luthor Castle. Keno, having received Chloe's call, sat eating appetizers. Girls kept asking him to dance, but he politely declined, using the excuse of grabbing a bite. Master Keno, the butler said, holding out a phone. You have a call. It's a classmate from high school, Pete. Thank you. Keno smiled, took the phone, and answered, "Hey, Pete? Where are you and your dance partner?" Pete's voice cracked with relief. "Thank God you answered." Tears welled in his eyes. "Keno, we need help. My date turned into a bat monster and it's chasing us. It's trying to eat us." "Bat monster?" Keno stood, thinking, just as I suspected, Peter's date must have been mutated by kryptonite, * good experimental material, * Lex was always looking for subjects. Maybe capturing it alive would help his research. "Where are you?" Chloe's voice boomed through the phone. "Highway 5, just outside Smallville. We're almost out of town." Before she could finish, a screech filled the line, followed by the terrified screams of Peter and Chloe, and the sound of metal grinding against asphalt as the car flipped. Keno headed for the door, telling the butler, "The dance ends at midnight. If I'm not back, wrap things up." "Yes, Master Keno." The butler bowed, watching Keno weave through the crowd to a secluded corner. The next second, he vanished, like he'd been erased from existence. The butler, though startled, quickly regained his composure. After working for the Luthors for over 20 years, he understood the importance of discretion. * Breathe, breathe, star. Keno blurred through the forest. Bang, bang, that he didn't bother avoiding the trees. His body slammed into them, leaving a human-shaped dent in the trunks. Cutting through the forest, Keno reached Highway 5 in seconds. He scanned the area and saw the wreck, a hideous bat monster crouched on top of an overturned SUV. The tattered red dress confirmed it had once been human. It clawed at the vehicle. Beneath it, Peter screamed in terror, while Chloe frantically tried to stay out of reach. Its scarlet eyes were wild, saliva dripping from its mouth, emitting a foul odor. Keno could tell that the monster was driven only by hunger and rage. "Clark is going to be bummed," he muttered, thinking about the damage to the car. He refocused on the monster. "Is there any way to change it back after it's become this grotesque?" Probably not. Shrugging off the thought, Keno grabbed a large tree beside him. "Up you go." He tugged. Boom, the tree uprooted easily. Whoosh, Keno swung the tree around, the branches whistling through the air. The motion caught the monster's attention. Roar, it roared, confusion in its eyes as it watched the figure waving a tree. Then, whoosh. Keno hurled the tree like a javelin. The distance closed in an instant. As the monster finally realized what was happening and tried to fly away, the tree hit. Boom, the tree slammed into the monster, sending it and the vehicle careening off the highway into the trees. Keno stared at the forest, his expression scornful. The tree pinned the bat monster. All it could do was roar. Keno's opinion of the monster plummeted. Jerome, Gray, and what were useless, but at least they could think. This thing was just a mindless beast. Keno sighed, strolling over to the SUV. There's no satisfaction in defeating something like this. Chapter 55 New Copy Card. You are listening at novelfull.audio. This is pretty wild. Gino gripped the car and gave it a tug. With a satisfying thump, the SUV righted itself, all four wheels back on the asphalt. The sudden movement sent Pete and Chloe, who were previously face-planting, yelping in pain. "Ow!" Chloe, clutching her throbbing forehead and mouth, fought down the urge to vomit, flung open the door, and stumbled out. She looked at Gino, her eyes wide, and said, "I'm so sorry, Gino. I totally wrecked your party." "Hey, no worries. We're friends, right?" Gino smiled. Helping Chloe was no big deal, he was more interested in that experimental specimen. Just friends." Chloe's face fell. Looking at Gino's calm expression, she felt a pang of something she couldn't quite name. After seeing Gino's magic trick tonight, Chloe felt a gulf widening between them. Maybe they were never meant to be in the same world. Maybe the only one who could walk beside him was the equally mysterious Clark. Gino didn't notice Chloe's inner turmoil. Little Black Pete, meanwhile, was crawling out of the SUV, his legs shaking like jelly. Even his normally full, dark lips were pale and purplish. Tonight hadn't exactly been a walk in the park for Peter. Oh, man, that was a total nightmare. Peter swallowed hard, glancing at Gino with awe and then at the creature thrashing in the woods. "Keno, what do we do now?" he finally squeaked. "What do we do?" Gino smirked, snapped a branch off a nearby tree, and said, "How do you react when a mouse gets into your house?" "Most people who aren't animal rights activists try to kill it," Peter replied. Gino whittled the branch into a crude stake. He turned to Chloe, a glint in his eye. "You know how the church used to deal with witches and vampires in the Middle Ages? They'd stake them through the heart." Gino tossed the stake in his hand. He grinned at Peter. "If you want to watch me dust your vampire bride, you're welcome to tag along." Pete shook his head so violently he almost gave himself whiplash. No way, no way was he getting close to that thing again, especially since the monster kept calling out his name. Gino wasn't surprised. He probably expected that. He pointed to the mangled SUV. "Then, you two better get out of here." Peter reluctantly helped the dejected Chloe back into the SUV. The beat-up SUV belched black smoke, but it slowly sputtered down the road. As the SUV disappeared from sight, Gino chuckled, strolled toward the bat monster, and pulled out his phone to call Lex. "Lex, we caught another fun thing." "Yeah, you're gonna need a bigger cage." Hanging up, Gino approached the monster, pinned beneath a fallen tree. The creature could only lift its head and snarl. Gino whispered, "Dead specimens are boring. Living ones? Now those have potential." A smile played on his lips as he raised the wooden stake and plunged it into the monster's arm. Thwack, star, blood and foul-smelling pus splattered across the leaves. Ignoring the monster's shriek, Gino quickly secured its limbs with 4 more stakes. In the cold moonlight, the bat monster's tattered red dress looked especially vivid and tragic. "Looks like she never got to that dance she wanted to go to so badly. Now, all that's left is a lifetime in the dark underground lab, basement level of Luthor chemical plant." Half of the world's top biologists crowded outside the giant glass enclosure, craning their necks for a better look at the creature. These scientists, lured by Luthor Group with exorbitant salaries, are here to assist Lex in his cutting-edge research. At the front, Lex stood with his hands clasped behind his back, staring with zealous fascination at the bat monster as it devoured a live cow. "Seriously, you've outdone yourself. You actually caught it alive." Lex turned to his brother, who was lounging on a nearby couch. When he got the call, Lex dropped everything and arranged for the specimen to be brought in ASAP. In the corner, Gino sprawled on the sofa, gazing at the ceiling. "Yeah, living," Gino replied absently. Cheapskate brother, he thought, as he checked his system interface. After weeks of quality time with Clark and friendly chats with Talia, he had enough points to redeem another copy card. He pictured the familiar gold card materializing between his fingers. The warm card with its intricate, elaborate designs pulsed with an aura of mystery. He wondered what to copy: the bat monster's abilities. Please. He could squash that thing with one finger. "Lex, when do you start the experiments?" Gino glanced at the petri dishes lining the lab and a few ideas clicked into place. "Normally, we'd be years away from tackling some of the technical hurdles, but with this guy," Lex said, patting the glass, eliciting a snarl from the monster. "I'm confident I can launch my first experiment any day now." "That's the spirit." Gino flicked his wrist, and the gold card vanished. He couldn't wait to see what surprises Lex's experiments would unleash. Early morning, as Gino pulled up to school in his sports car, the 2 police officers guarding the gate greeted him with warm smiles. "Mr. Keno," Gino eyed them, wondering if this had anything to do with last night's incident. "We received a call from Mr. Julie Moss's father. He says his daughter never came home last night and there was some damage to the house." One of the officers continued, "According to our intel, she was supposed to attend a dance at your place." The other officer asked, "Did you see her at the dance?" Gino smiled smoothly. "No, I've never met Miss Julie Moss. And none of my guests last night did either." The officers nodded. "Sorry to bother you." It was Julie's father who pointed the finger. "The old guy seems a little unhinged and keeps badgering us for answers. After all, who was Mr. Keno?" A trust fund kid who sponsors the entire police department with tens of thousands of dollars every year was not going to kidnap Moss's ugly, fat daughter. Gino shrugged. It's okay. I can understand Mr. Moss's concern. The officers nodded and bowed. Have a good day, Mr. Keno. Gino waved dismissively. As for Julie's dad, Gino figured it was better to let the guy think his daughter was simply missing, tell a man the truth, and he might lose it completely. His fair, chubby daughter had transformed into a mindless, bloodthirsty bat monster. Some things are better left unsaid. Today's rant, people are so quick to judge. Clark saves the protagonist's brother, so the protagonist buys Clark a car. He offers a little dating advice and suddenly people are complaining. Was the protagonist of Grey's Anatomy being merciful when he taught Clark a lesson? Is this not the normal way friends treat each other? The internet is a madhouse. Show an ounce of kindness, and you're automatically a pushover or a simp. You have to be a dark and ruthless antihero, right? Chapter 56 Experiment. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Gino was only planning on showing up at school for a single day, but before he even made it to the building, his plans got derailed by a phone call. The experiment's about to start. You better get over here, ASAP. Lex was practically vibrating with excitement on the other end. He just told Gino to hurry up and hung up. Talk about efficient, Gino muttered with a wry smile. That cheapskate never does anything halfway, it's always full speed ahead. Just then, Gino spotted the campus trio heading his way from the west. Hey, Gino, what are you doing just standing here? Chloe, hands clasped behind her back, still as carefree as ever, tilted her head. You look pretty happy about something. The corners of his mouth quirked up. He definitely was in a good mood. Can't I be happy? Gino grinned, giving Chloe's shoulder a light pat. His gaze then drifted to Clark and Peter, who were trailing behind her looking miserable. Gino glanced at Clark's sulky expression, figuring he was still bummed about Chloe scratching the paint on his SUV, but Gino didn't have the time or energy to play therapist for Clark right now. He had to get to the factory for the experiment. If that crazy old man screwed things up, he could at least try to help. Gino snapped his attention back to Chloe. Hey, Chloe, something came up at my company. Can you tell the teachers I had to bail? Bail? Chloe started to ask what was going on, but thought better of it, just nodding. Okay, sure. After ditching the three of them, Gino sped off to the factory in his silver supercar. He strolled into the elevator and punched the button for the first floor. When the doors slid open, the massive laboratory was revealed once more. The difference this time was the place was buzzing with activity. Expensive-looking bioequipment was scattered everywhere, connected by a tangled mess of pipes. And in the center, sat a gigantic tank filled with some kind of solution. Mr. Gino, the president wants to see you right away, a researcher panted, rushing over. What's Lex up to now? Gino stared at the biotank. Inside, a green liquid enveloped a humanoid figure with black hair and a tall frame. A closer look revealed his features were about 40 to 50% similar to Clark. Gino had no idea how Lex had gotten his hands on Clark's DNA, but that cheapskate had pulled it off. Judging by the development of the clone, this experiment had been running for quite a while. The researcher's explanation cut off Gino's train of thought. Mr. Lex is making the final adjustments. We're planning on siphoning power from the entire town to power this bioequipment. The goal is for those magical stones to further stimulate the experimental subject's genes and activate biological abilities. Whoa, hold on, slow down, Gino interrupted with a sigh. Just take me to him. Asterisk damn it, these scientists always used a bunch of jargon. Simply put, they needed a ton of energy to run the equipment and juice up the clone's abilities. It was annoying when science nerds used complicated words to say something simple. The two walked side by side, the researcher led the way, and Gino quickly spotted Lex amidst a pile of equipment. It wasn't hard. Among a group of bald guys in white coats, only the brightly polished head stood out. Lex was standing beneath the green tank, lips pursed, frantically tapping away at the keyboard on the instrument panel, making the final adjustments. His dark green eyes were burning with such fanaticism that he didn't even notice Geno standing behind him. Geno glanced at the experimental subject label on the tank, B0, and quipped, "Ever think about what happens if this fails?" "Then we try again," Lex replied without turning around, catching Geno's reflection in the glass. Scientists aren't afraid of failure. As long as we learn from our mistakes, success is inevitable. Geno shrugged. "I mean, what if you create some uncontrollable monster?" Lex grinned, a smug look plastered on his face. "That's what I have you for, dummy. I'm counting on you to help me clean up the mess." Geno sighed, "I just hope you don't end up in the slammer for illegal experiments." Lex shot back with a bite, "Even if I do, I'm getting the best deluxe single room, and I'm ratting you out as my accomplice." Geno rolled his eyes. Classic big brother. The two bickered as Lex finalized the adjustments. Taking a deep breath, Lex tried to calm his nerves. He clapped his hands to get everyone's attention. "All right, everyone. Experiment starts in 1 minute." The seconds ticked by. When the minute hand hit the mark, Lex waved his arm. "Flip the switch, bang, star." The crimson metal button was slammed down. In the next second, countless light blue currents surged along the pipes into the tank, electric sparks flew, and the green stone inside the tank pulsed with an intense green light, then crumbled into countless green fragments that clung to the clone's skin. The clone's skin, once yellow, turned deathly pale. The kryptonite coursing through his system caused his body to convulse, cracks forming on the surface of his skin, crack star. As more current flooded the tank and the water temperature continued to rise, the eyes of the once still experimental subject twitched. In the next moment, they snapped open wide amidst a chorus of gasps. Negative emotions from B0 test subject +10, +10. Without hesitation, the experimental subject in the tank opened his mouth and gulped down a lungful of the green liquid. Geno noticed the blood vessels under his skin bulging, emitting a faint green glow. "Aha!" The experimental subject thrashed wildly, clearly terrified, pounding on the glass jar. His pure black eyes were wide with horror as he stared down at the group of strangely dressed creatures. "He looks like he's in pain," someone shouted, pointing at the experimental subject's furrowed brow. "Mr. Lex, what do we do?" Chaos erupted. Most of them had been pessimistic about the experiment's chances anyway. Nobody thought it would work on the first try, but the opposite had happened. The experiment had succeeded. The experimental subject, designated B0, was awake, but no one knew what to do next. Release him. But who could guarantee he wouldn't turn into a bat monster like Julie? Lex glanced at his brother. Geno's blue eyes were resolute. The younger brother grinned and cracked his knuckles, giving Lex a slight nod. "I got this, star." "Okay." Lex took a deep breath, chest rising and falling, then made his decision. "Everyone, get out of the laboratory, now," Lex roared. "Seal off this lab. Nobody opens this door until you hear from me." As if they had found their leader, the panicked scientists scrambled out of the underground base, and the metal door slowly descended under Lex's control. Bang, star. As the door slammed shut, only Geno and Lex remained in the base, and the experimental subject B0, still thrashing in the tank. Chapter 57 Second Copy, Bizarro's Talent. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Beep, beep, the sirens wailed through the deserted experimental facility. A red light cast an eerie glow on the cold glass, adding to the base's unsettling atmosphere. Lex could hear his own ragged breathing under the glass jar. Ha! Why so nervous? Was it scientific passion or a twisted attempt to create an artificial god? Lost in his thoughts, Lex turned. His brother, Geno, was silently studying the contents of the nutrient tank. Geno's calm seemed to wash over Lex, slowing his racing heart. Beside him, Geno rubbed his neck, a fierce glint in his eyes. He probably guessed what Lex had cooked up. B0, better known as Bizarro, the anti-Superman, super speed, strength, flight. He had all the Man of Steel's basic powers, but instead of heat vision, ice beams shot from his eyes, and fire, not ice, poured from his mouth. Bizarro's origin was often tied to Lex Luthor in various stories. Now, in this reality, his own half-brother had also built one, but those details didn't matter. Despite being Superman's opposite, Bizarro was hardly a match for the real deal. What truly interested Gino was Bizarro's ability to absorb green kryptonite and become even stronger. Gino glanced down at the golden copy card in his hand. With Bizarro's talent in hand, he was going to be unstoppable. He turned to Lex and whispered, "Let him out, brother." Lex stared intently at Gino, leaned over, and pressed a green button, barely audibly murmuring, "I'm trusting you on this." As Lex's finger hit the switch. Bang! The glass tank above them shattered, glass shards and fluid rained down, hitting the floor with a splatter sound. The water shorted out a wire, causing sizzling sparks. Snap! The circuit breaker tripped, plunging the entire base into darkness, in the pitch black. "Can you see him?" Lex clenched his fist around a pistol he pulled from his pocket. "Yeah, he's on the floor," Gino replied calmly, his eyes fixed on the dark figure sprawled on the metal platform. The figure had pale, purple skin, like a zombie from a movie. Kryptonite exposure seemed to have thinned his once black hair. He wore only tight shorts. The towering figure lay curled up, trembling like a terrified child. "Hold on." Gino narrowed his eyes, studying Bizarro, who remained on the ground, wide-eyed and shaking. He wasn't acting aggressive, instead, he cowered, his eyes full of fear as he stared at Gino. "AAA, AAA." Bizarro opened his dry, cracked lips and whimpered incoherently. Seeing the subject's reaction, Gino sighed and tapped his own head. "How could I forget? This guy's not exactly a genius." If there was one thing holding Bizarro back, making him weaker than Superman, it was his 5-year-old intellect. Childishness and naivete were Bizarro's defining traits. The big guy trembling on the platform was essentially a kid in a grown man's body, a kid who probably still liked lollipops. "What are you waiting for?" In the darkness, Lex looked at Gino, confused. His brother wasn't known for his soft heart. Gino's hesitation meant the experiment wasn't a threat. "Right." Gino glanced at Lex, a hint of pity in his eyes, and explained, "Your experiment, well, he's not the sharpest tool in the shed." Lex frowned, squinting at the shivering figure in the dark. "Not the sharpest? What does that mean?" "Exactly what it sounds like." Gino started toward Bizarro. Lex was shocked. "Wait, Gino. Be careful of that thing." Ignoring his brother's warning, Gino slowly approached Bizarro. His sneakers clicked on the metal floor with each step. "Damn it." Lex gritted his teeth. After a moment of thought, he turned and ran toward the power switch. He would restore the base's lights to see what was going on. Meanwhile, Bizarro's black eyes were filled with terror. He watched the figure approaching him, feeling an inexplicable aura that made him want to run. "Hang on." Gino sped up, stopping right in front of Bizarro. "Uh-huh." Bizarro scrambled backward, his huge body hitting the wall. Trapped, he looked around frantically as the man kept coming. "Woo!" Bizarro clenched his fists, ready to fight back. Click! Another series of sparks, and the lights flickered back on, bathing the room in light. The sudden brightness made Bizarro squeeze his eyes shut in pain. Tears streamed down his face. In the glare, Bizarro saw the figure reaching out a hand, bathed in the light. The man seemed to have a halo around him. Gino stood over Bizarro, looking into his eyes, and said clearly, "From today on, your name is Bizarro." "Be Bizarro." Bizarro tilted his head, mimicking Gino's pronunciation, his voice hoarse. It seemed like something worth celebrating. The fear gone, Bizarro grabbed Gino's arm and shook it, smiling goofily as he repeated, "Bizarro, Bizarro." The golden card, visible only to Gino, disintegrated into countless particles and flowed into Bizarro's chest. Contact B0 and acquire B0's talent. Like the first time, Gino felt no shaking or trembling. The process was seamless, and he felt no different, no painful sensations in his eyes or burning sensation in his throat. With a knowing smile, Gino shook off Bizarro's hand. He gestured for Bizarro to follow him, making a walking motion with his fingers. "Bizarro." Bizarro followed Gino obediently, moving his body like a zombie. "Gino." Lex, who had frantically flipped the switch, rushed in, worried about his brother. Instead, he found the experimental subject following Geno like a baby duck. Then, Geno's next words confused him. "Lex, you got any kryptonite? Hand one over." "Wait, I need to remind you, that stuff's really bad for you." Lex frowned, knowing his brother's situation. That's why Lex started his research, to solve the kryptonite's effects on Geno. First of all, thank you to the reader 1455147117727412224 for the 200-point reward. Okay, carrot. Let's talk about some digressions next. This chapter solves the weakness of kryptonite. I will write everything that needs to be written. I have considered the development of the protagonist long before writing the book. This is an advanced revelation. The protagonist system is like an intelligent AI. When the protagonist copies A, the system will copy this code like a computer. In the future, I will explain how the protagonist system came about. Interested readers can take a guess. Not many Bizarro guessed it in the last issue, and they all went to guess the Day of Doom. Later, when the protagonist copies B, the system will determine the conflicting parts of the code. For example, A becomes weaker under the influence of kryptonite, and B becomes stronger under the influence of kryptonite. AI will intelligently determine to delete the A code and retain the B code, thereby enhancing the protagonist's strength. This is the basic operation logic of the system, and the best code will be replaced and retained. Strong, if it is the same code, it is doubled by ×2, over. Chapter 58 Awakening, Freezing Beam. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Incandescent lights blazed in the underground base, casting harsh shadows from the cold walls onto the two figures. Geno paused, sensing the caution in Lex's voice. He took a deep breath and said, "I'm sure, Lex. Some things just have to be done." He needed to verify some ideas, and the system wasn't going to tell him which talents it had copied from Bizarro. He had to figure it out himself, and that meant taking risks, but as long as his efforts meant something, Geno was okay with the hardship. "Alright, it's your call." Lex didn't push it. He knew Geno's character and, honestly, he agreed with the decision. Lex turned and headed toward the safe on the far side of the room. He squatted down and punched in Geno's birthday. Beep! The safe clicked open, revealing a row of emeralds inside. Lex slipped on gloves and carefully picked up a small piece of kryptonite. He stared at the mysterious stone, took a deep breath, and walked back towards Geno. 50 meters, 40 meters, when they were 10 meters apart, Lex locked eyes with Geno and said in a low voice, "Tell me immediately if you feel any pain." "I will." Geno kept his gaze fixed on the green kryptonite. Lex kept walking. The green stone loomed larger and larger in Geno's vision, but he felt nothing. No exhaustion, nothing. Success. A wave of understanding washed over Geno. He had a much clearer idea of how the system worked. The copied talent from Bizarro had freed him from the limitations of kryptonite. Geno's eyes flickered. He even felt a strange connection to the green rock. "Hand it over. I think I've conquered these nasty rocks." Geno smiled at Lex, reassuring him that he was fine. Seeing that Geno was okay, Lex let out a sigh of relief. He wiped his bald head, clearing the sweat from his forehead, and tossed the kryptonite to Geno. "Here you go." Snap, asterisk. Geno caught the kryptonite in his palm. The cold stone felt almost warm. "It's warm." Geno closed his eyes, feeling the changes it brought. It was like sinking into a hot bath after a long day, or huddling around a bonfire on a cold night. Every cell in his body seemed to be rejoicing. What he had always avoided was now easily held in his hand. Whoa! Geno reveled in the warmth, as Lex watched him closely. The veins in Geno's arm, the one holding the kryptonite, began to bulge, and countless tiny blood vessels turned a dark, almost black, green. They spread, spiderwebbing across his skin until they reached his left temple. Suddenly, Geno's left eye began to itch, as if something was brewing inside. Clutch, star. Geno squeezed his left eye shut, the slight stinging sensation making him wince. "What's wrong?" "Geno." Lex sounded alarmed. Nothing, just a little discomfort. Keno couldn't explain it. His left eye ached and burned, bringing tears to his eye. Then, a mist filled his eye, and the tears froze on his cheeks, creating tiny tear-shaped ice crystals. The feeling intensified. With an effort, Keno forced his eye open. The blue of his iris was now filled with a cold fog. The mist swirled, almost dazzling, like an unfathomable ocean with clear blue waves. Then, a thick, intensely blue beam of light shot from Geno's left eye. The intense blue light overpowered even the lights of the base. "Get out of the way, Lex!" Keno roared, instinctively turning his head to avoid hitting Lex. Buzz, star, the energy in his eye exploded outward, a dazzling pillar of blue light roaring from his left eye, shooting into the air like a blade of pure cold. It was filled with tiny ice crystals, the frigid light radiating an icy mist that seemed to freeze the air itself. Bang. Star, the brilliant beam of light made a piercing high-frequency whine, like a blizzard raging in their ears. The cold ray slammed into a glass container across the room. Click, click, the intensely cold light clung to the metal container. Moisture in the air condensed, instantly forming a layer of ice crystals that raced across the surface of the glass, encasing it in thick frost. As Geno's gaze lingered, the light intensified, the frost solidifying into a solid sheet of ice. In a blink, a huge ice sculpture stood silently in the lab, the air around it noticeably colder. Keno moved his gaze, and the ice energy in his eye followed, leaving a trail of ice shards in the air. Who? Keno gasped for air, trying to control the cold energy that had condensed in his eye. Finally, focusing his thoughts, the beam of light winked out. Keno covered his left eye, still radiating cold mist, and stared at the scene before him. The once pristine base now looked like an Arctic wasteland. The experimental container was encased in ice, and it was clear its internal structure had been shattered by the extreme cold. It looked like it would crumble into pieces with a light touch. Unbelievable. Lex's eyes shone with excitement. He turned to Keno, rubbing his hands together. "You're going to have to cooperate with my experiments, Keno." Lex was looking at Keno like he was a lab rat. Keno just smiled wryly and agreed to cooperate, though some questions were swirling in his head. If I copied Bizarro's cold ray, why is it only coming from one eye? Keno had a vague idea, but he wasn't sure yet. Bizarro, who looked like a zombie, whined and looked at Keno and Lex, rubbing his stomach. Bizarro, Keno said, glancing at Bizarro's grotesque features. He patted Lex on the shoulder and asked, "So, what are you going to do with him?" Lex snapped out of his scientific fervor and became the hard-headed businessman again. He stroked his chin and looked at Bizarro. "I'll keep him in the lab for now. I'll have my scientists teach him language, and then try to restore him to his normal appearance." Keno nodded. "That's probably best. Letting him run loose would just cause panic. People would think it's a zombie apocalypse." Chapter 59, a short story on a rainy night. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Boom, thunder cracked across the city's night sky, rain hammered down, each drop adding a frigid bite to the darkness. A tall black man, soaked to the bone, stumbled through the downpour. The cheap soles of his shoes slapped against the wet pavement. Ha, ha. He shivered in his drenched clothes. He pushed on, heading toward the tallest building in the steel and concrete jungle. A lightning flash momentarily lit up a black marble slab erected in front of the building. Luthor Group. His eyes locked onto the name, then rose to take in the full height of Luthor Tower. In America, a land of exorbitant wealth, the Luthor family headquarters stood tall in the metropolis. Lionel Luthor, known for his arrogance, had erected this skyscraper as a testament to his family's power and wealth. The building was dark. Even Lionel, notorious for his ruthlessness, wouldn't force his employees to work overtime in this weather. The black man got closer and spotted a faint light on the ground floor. A janitor was pushing a vacuum cleaner around the lobby, headphones covered his ears, and he was lost in his music. Bang! 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 The black man pounded on the glass, frantic. Will, the cleaner, Will, heard his name and pulled off his headphones. A voice broke through the glass. He turned to see a disheveled, rain-soaked black man leaning against the door, hammering on the glass. Earl, Will dropped the vacuum cleaner and approached Earl. "What are you doing here?" Will knew Earl from their time as colleagues at Luthor Group. Earl had supposedly been injured while transporting fertilizer, left after a settlement. Clutching his chest under his windbreaker, Earl gasped, "I need to see Lionel." The black man's face hardened. "I know he's here," Will sighed and looked away. "Sorry, Earl. I can't let you in. I have a family to support." The black man grew desperate. He slammed his fist against the glass. "Will, you know what they did to me at that factory in the sticks?" He pounded his chest. "I've got something they can't cure." Will rolled his eyes. Here it came again, the same old song and dance. He pursed his lips. "That's why you got canned, Earl. No, you don't understand. This can't be cured." Earl pleaded with his former colleague. "Please, let me in. I need to get this straightened out with Lionel. That factory, it's the only place that can fix me." Will sighed, gesturing at the black man through the glass. "Keep this up, and I'm calling security." "No, please." Earl's face was a mask of helplessness. His hands gripped the door handle, eyes pleading. Will shook his head, turning away from the black man's pleas and went back to his cleaning. Buzz, buzz. Before he'd gone far, a strange noise caught his attention. "Earl, I'm warning you." Will turned to see Earl's body pressed against the glass door, spasming uncontrollably. The movements were so rapid they blurred, the image flickering like a broken film reel. Will's eyes widened in disbelief. "What the f***ck?" Then, it hit some kind of breaking point. The glass shattered under the extreme vibration. Crash! The glass exploded into a hail of fragments. "Oh my God!" Will screamed, instinctively shielding his face. Pa bang bang! Debris rained down on Will, and then he felt something grabbing him. "Earl?" Will stared at Earl, who had his arms around his neck. Before he could speak, the black man went into another violent spasm. His neck wasn't made of steel. Crack! The sound of bones snapping echoed through the hall, mingling with the music. They both crashed to the floor. Earl, the shaking subsided, looked down in horror at his colleague. The other man stared blankly at the ceiling, eyes wide, blood gushing from his mouth and nose. I killed him." Earl trembled, shaking his head wildly. "No, it's not my fault. I didn't mean to." He stumbled to his feet, waved his arms, and bolted out into the rain-soaked night. Buzz! An icy wave blasted at the glass of water on the table. Not until the entire glass froze into an ice sculpture did Gino extinguish the freezing power in his eyes. "Phew, getting better." Gino stood and stretched. After half a day of trying, he was now able to transfer the energy from his left eye to his right eye, thereby increasing its power. Gino rubbed his sore neck and left the room. It was 2 a.m. He figured he'd hit the kitchen for a snack. Gino found some pizza, grabbed a glass of milk, and planned to head back to his room. Passing Lex's room, Gino glanced inside. The cheapskate was still up, leaning back in his boss's chair, holding a phone and looking pissed. "What's up?" Gino changed his mind and walked into Lex's room, food in hand. Like his personality, Lex's house was neat and efficient. Aside from the fact that the tables and chairs were not green, Lex's quilt and even the bed was green, and the desk was filled with business documents and some scientific journals. Gino put the plate on the table, grabbed the milk, and took a sip, asking Lex what happened. "Okay," Lex said into the phone. "I understand." He hung up and tossed the phone onto the table, a nasty expression on his face. Glancing at Gino, Lex picked up the pizza, took a bite, and sneered, "A janitor died at the head office. The media's all over it. Janitor? Crime of passion?" Gino raised an eyebrow. "A janitor wouldn't have much money, so you could easily rule out murder for money," Lex sneered, chewing the pizza. "Who knows? Let Lionel deal with it." Chapter 60 happened. You are listening at novelfull.audio. A new day. Okay, This is what the final exam next week will focus on, and I expect you all to make your families proud by the end of June. The bell rang, signaling the end of class, and Chloe headed out, holding a stack of review materials. Peter and Clark followed her. Xiao Hei scratched his head, glancing at the empty seat. Hey, where's Gino today? No idea. Chloe smirked, gesturing with her chin towards the books in her arms. I'm gonna drop these off at Gino's. Peter and Clark exchanged knowing glances. Chloe was on a mission to find Gino, so Peter just looked at Clark. Alright, Clark, what's your plan? Gonna go home and play some video games. Clark clearly wasn't stressing about studying. He added with a grin, my parents are out of town, so. Peter immediately threw his arm around Clark's neck. Awesome, I'm in. Peter, like many guys, hated studying. He'd rather sleep than crack a book. The three split up at the school gate. Clark drove his beat-up off-roader back to the Kent farm with Peter. The two were immediately hooked on video games. Boom. Clark, controller in hand, had his character take down Peter's. Seriously? Peter groaned, flopping dramatically onto the sofa. Clark was about to say something when he heard a faint noise. Hold up, I think I heard something. Clark put down the controller, pushed open the door, and ran out of the farmhouse. The afternoon sun bathed the farm, and Clark headed towards the sound. He pushed open the old warehouse door and looked up at the loft above. There was a continuous trembling coming from the yellowed wooden boards. Creak. Who's up there? Clark called out. No one answered. Peter rushed over, holding a powerful flashlight and looking nervously at his friend. What's going on? Ever since the Jolie incident, Peter was on edge. Let's go see. Clark clenched his fists. Their shoes clicked on the old wooden floor. As they approached the attic, Peter aimed the flashlight into the corner. The bright beam cut through the darkness, revealing a tall black man lying in the corner, sweating. He looked weak, his eyes squinting in the light. The black man struggled to raise his arms. What the hell? Where did this bum come from? Peter muttered, grabbing a pitchfork, ready to confront him. Wait. Clark stopped Peter. Clark narrowed his eyes, studying the black man's face. I know him. You're Earl. Clark looked shocked. What are you doing on my farm? The black man shook his head, leaning against the wall, his voice trembling. I need to see your father. He's the only one I trust. Earl explained what had happened to him. An experiment by Luthor Group. Clark frowned. Gino's face flashed in his mind. He shook his head. There must be some mistake. No, there's no mistake. Earl was agitated. Before Clark could respond, he grabbed Clark's arm. Look at my hands. My veins are dark green. Is that normal? Whoa. The moment Earl touched Clark, a wave of weakness washed over him. The veins on the back of his hands suddenly bulged and glowed dark green. Clark's legs gave way, and he collapsed. Earl convulsed, his body spasming. Ugh. Clark struggled to hold himself up, looking up at Peter. Call an ambulance. Earl was rushed away in an ambulance. Peter and Clark sat in the hospital hallway, discussing Earl. Peter was curious. So, how do you even know that down on his luck, dude? Clark leaned forward, resting his chin on his hands, a nostalgic look in his eyes. Earl used to work on my dad's farm. He helped out every summer for 10 years. Then he left to work at the Luthor chemical plant for better pay. I remember he taught me how to play guitar and told me that guys who played guitar always got the girls. Nah. Peter interrupted. Playing guitar won't get you girls. Being rich will. Clark scowled, then sighed. Anyway, Earl was a good guy. I just don't know what happened to him to get this weird disease. As they talked, two police officers approached them. Clark recognized them as the same cops who'd been to his farm before. Nurse, which room is Earl Skeena in? They flashed their badges. The nurse checked the computer. Ward 5, second floor. Clark and Peter exchanged a look and stood up. Clark walked towards the officers. Excuse me, I'm a friend of Earl's. What's going on? That what kind of trouble could Earl be in that the cops would show up at the hospital? The officers glanced at Clark. You're friends with Mr. Kent, right? That's right. Okay, we can tell you. The older officer, a man in his 50s, lowered his voice. We received a warrant from the Metropolitan Police. Earl is suspected of murdering a janitor at the Luthor Group. What? Clark was stunned. That's impossible. Before Clark could say anything else, they heard a shout from the second floor of the hospital. Help! We need help up here. The officers immediately ran towards the stairs, leaving Clark behind. Clark and Peter followed. When they reached the second floor, they saw Earl in his hospital gown, shaking uncontrollably, so fast that he seemed to be leaving afterimages in the air. Stop him! The officers yelled and lunged at Earl. Wham! Earl threw them aside, sending them crashing into a metal frame in the corner. They groaned in pain. Earl, what's wrong with you? Clark rushed toward him, arms outstretched, seizing the opportunity. Clark grabbed Earl's wrists, trying to restrain him. Locked in Clark's grip, Earl thrashed for a moment, then seemed to lose all his strength and collapsed into Clark's arms. Clark suddenly felt weak, and they both fell to the cold floor. It felt as if his entire body was submerged in ice-cold water. A wave of powerlessness washed over him. Clark struggled to stay conscious, telling himself, I have to talk to Gino and figure this out. After all, Earl's condition seemed eerily similar to what he'd seen on guys exposed to kryptonite.